Okay, yep, then. Hi everyone and welcome to the next round and episode of the Auto-remediation working group. Yeah, today I put the topic for today to talk about the tool agnostic remediation process, why it's needed, and actually what's the benefit of setting it up. Why is that important? Because last time we talked about the template, the remediation template that we want to work on. I will also open it in a couple of minutes, but during this discussion, we figured out that it's not really obvious why we should build a remediation workflow that is tool agnostic. I mean, there are solutions out there like Ansible where you can build remediations and then automate your operations, but why makes it sense to have here a more separate, why you have here separation of the process and the tooling. And this is what I want to demo today. And then I also want to drive the discussion. But before going to do that, let's jump to the template, to the scenario that we agreed on working. It's the template for it's a template that we want to work on in order to define a process based on JVM memory exhaustion. When we detect this problem, we want to kick off a remediation process then that fixes the problem for us. And what we had defined during the last two meetings, it's the process as laid out right here. It's a data gathering that we want to kick off first. Then the change process that needs to be tackled. In other words, who is allowed to trigger the remediation and who should be involved in fixing the problem. And then the recovery process itself, where Kevin gave us really great input on how they are solving this problem. I mean, they use here GitLab to spin up an Ansible tower and to execute the playbook. And then, yeah, we want to do the validation step to make sure that the JVM is running again and accepting the traffic. And finally, in case we could not resolve the problem, we escalate it to inform other parties that should be involved. All right, yep. And this is the process we talked last time. And we also defined action items on that. And Kevin, I mean, you texted me or you sent me an email about the action item of working on the sample app. Can you also share the group what you accomplished or what you can contribute here?
Sure. So a member of our company had created a sample app that basically just had two buttons. One, it increments a counter to show that the application's working. Then he had a second button that would just hit a loop that would exhaust the memory. So I reached out to him to see if we could turn that over to this group since it was already done and working. And he did remind me that, you know, we do have a company policy about sharing any intellectual property that was created in-house. You know, even though it's very basic, we didn't want to share it directly. But he did give me, you know, the looping code that runs it out of memory. So then, you know, we talked about possibly putting it into the sample app used for Keptn, the carts app, the sock shop app. You know, you had asked me for a good location. Oh, my computer wants to restart. All right. You had asked me for a good location to put it. And I was looking at that sample app and realized that they already had a similar scenario based off of CPU exhaustion that they built into that app by sending it a certain ID for an item in the cart. So I suggested, wait, why don't we do that same thing? We'll create a unique ID for JVM memory exhaustion, insert that looping code, and then we should be able to test it that way.
All right. Yep. Thanks for the update. I think, yeah, doing this and going with the cards app would make sense since it's a Java Spring Boot app, and yeah, adding this additional scenario into the app would make sense and should work out. All right. Okay. And
since Alex is joining here as well, because I was talking to Johannes today, if it would make sense to use the Potato Head application for this. Do you know, Alex, are there any plans to have a Java service also in the Potato Head application? Because right now everything is written in Go, and what the working group has agreed here is to first tackle a JVM process. So I was just wondering.
The distributed version that's currently in a branch. There is a PR open. It's not yet submitted because the Litmus people, they have worked on it, but they will be working on it. So you could easily provide a leg or a head service that is written in Java. You just have to follow the same HTTP REST interface. So that wouldn't really matter. You wouldn't have to replace all of those. We just have to provide like one of those services as a Java service if you wanted to.
Okay. Because if we have to build it into one service, then we can also think about reusing the Potato Head as I think going forward would be a good idea.
You could use a simple Spring Boot application and just have to stick to the same interface and just load another image there. The only thing is we build most images right now from scratch, which would be a bit harder also with Java-based images. But you would have to install it then inside the image.
Okay, we would have to take a look at this. But if the Litmus folks are already working there, we can.
The distributed version is there, and then following on the protocol is easy. I think it's just more how you build the container properly. But that's something that can be figured out.
All right. Okay. Yeah, this could be or should be option 2 when we don't want to go with cards. All right. Okay, and yeah, as we also discussed last time, I want to demo today Keptn and how Keptn can implement this process, the data gathering, change process, recovery, and so on. And yeah, this is what I actually want to do today, and also then to drive the discussion of why having a tool agnostic approach. And let me get started by going to Keptn first. And what I did is basically I went to my Git repository that contains the process definition, and this one is added or configured in the shipyard.yaml. And what I did then is I went to my production environment where I want to activate my remediation process. It's the production for customer A, or it's the stage is called production customer A. And what I basically did, I added this remediation sequence, this one, and then I added the task for the data gathering, for get remediation, for action, meaning really doing the execution, and then the evaluation task. And additionally, I also added a sequence that kind of works as fallback or as that takes an action when a remediation failed. And this one I just called escalate. And I configured a trigger. And this trigger is configured in a way that it executes or it starts this sequence whenever remediation failed. And this one has just one task in it, and it's the escalation task. All right. And this is what I added to my shipyard, to my process definition. And I'm now able to trigger that particular sequence. And today I will use Postman to do this manually, but just imagine that this can be automated by an integration into monitoring tool that monitors your environment, identifies a problem, and when the problem appears, it just sends out an event to Keptn to kick off the remediation process. This is what I'm doing now manually. And when I switch now to my Keptn installation, I can already see here on the environment screen that the remediation is ongoing. I go to the sequence, I see that the remediation is started. And when I click on it, here I already see, yeah, the remediation is running. The data gathering step is executed. And in a couple of seconds, let me just refresh. For some reason, the next task is currently not triggered, but let me just show you the execution I did a couple of minutes before, where the data gathering was done, the remediation was retrieved, action was executed, and the evaluation happened. I just have to be clear that this is currently not working or implemented in the background, but I'm just showing you that the process can be modeled and executed as laid out here, because the services that are actually or should do this job are not available now. And instead, I'm using here this echo service. It's a very stupid dummy service that just receives the event, sends back that Iwana takes care of doing this job. It waits a minute or waits a second, then it finishes the action and returns back to the Keptn. And for this particular task, you can see that actually two services were listening, the echo service and then the echo service data gatherer, and both were running in parallel and doing their job. And after a couple of seconds, they were done, and Keptn was then going on with the next task in this process, which was then the get remediation, which is also mimicked and simulated here by this echo service. And as I said, and I configured also my remediation process in a way that the escalation will always happen, because I'm listening here to the trigger that has a filter on warning, and always when the warning appears, then escalation will be triggered. And Kevin, because last time you were mainly asking why should I now use Keptn instead of Ansible, what I want to show you right now is that on the one hand, Keptn gives you a way to define what you should do, and the tooling that is actually then underneath or doing the execution is abstracted away and can be exchanged depending on your needs. And you can also think of adding more different tools to the task depending on what you actually then want to have implemented. Kevin, do you have feedback on that, or what's your take?
Yeah. Yeah, so just to kind of recap what I was speaking of last time, and as we talked about it, you know, I kind of had an aha moment, but so in our remediation process, as we go through each of these steps, everyone was done by Ansible because it needed, you know, logic, programming logic that, you know, that Keptn itself wasn't really built in to go do. So for instance, the data gathering, okay, we can send the problem event into Keptn from Dynatrace, but then some smarts needed to go and retrieve more information that we could act upon. So we were using Ansible for everything. And so my statement, I guess, was if I'm only using Keptn for auto remediation, should I install another product to do this, or should we just continue to use just Ansible since that was doing 100% of the work? You know, why put some other tool in the middle and have a dependency? And then we further discussed the fact of, that Keptn is also available for quality gates. And that kind of spurred the discussion of, oh yeah, we're kind of talking right now as an operational mindset of, we have this thing in production, something happens, we want to fix it. But it can do more than that, in that, hey, we just deployed new code, and out of this pipeline, we want to, run tests against it and then validate, oh, nope, it's bad. Now we want to do some rollback, and that process is also remediation. So I think the more that Keptn is in your process of quality gates and in the pipeline, it makes more sense. From where we were starting in just a strictly operational role, I didn't see a lot of value add to put a tool in the middle just strictly for auto remediation. So I do understand that value now, but I just guess I don't know how you would sell this just to people that are only interested in auto remediation. If they kind of have a tool of choice right now, Ansible, Puppet, Chef, whatever their tool is. That's where I guess would need help seeing where's that strict value add that we could say, hey, you really need this product. And something I was thinking about as we were walking through this too is maybe as we have this template built, maybe we should go back to our mind map that we did too, and start linking the things that we've built in our template and see how many things we've created out of our mind map. Because I know, like, one of the things we talked about is, hey, we want a tool that, gives us some audit capabilities or, approval capabilities, and I think we've built some of that in our template. But just as a side note, maybe we should step back and see how well we're following what we theorized in the beginning.
Okay, yeah. To your first argument, or to first note, why should I use Keptn now instead of Ansible? I mean, with Ansible, what you have or what you get is actually you combine all your actions or all your tasks that you want to do as part of your remediation into one playbook or runbook, they call it. And just imagine how difficult this is to exchange certain components within this runbook. And because you have to then to change, you have to go through the runbook, modify it, and taking care of updating all the spots that needs to be changed. And with this, or with Keptn in place, you add a tool on top, that's true, but it abstracts away the tooling underneath. Because at the end, you can easily exchange the components that are then doing the certain tasks of part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand the concept. It would just be a matter of I guess selling me on putting this in just for auto remediation purposes. I mean, I as a package, it makes a lot of sense. But just as auto remediation only, I don't know.
Hey, Kevin, this is Andy. I'm sorry that I'm joining late, and maybe this has been discussed before, but I just tuned into the conversation. One question to your auto remediation scripts in Ansible. So you said everything is in Ansible. That means you have probably built libraries and libraries, and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands lines of automation in Ansible. Is this correct?
No, so we're just starting down this journey.
Okay.
So we only have, I think, 3 or 4 playbooks that we have. So each of these are kind of broken out into playbooks, and what we did was to sidestep Ansible Tower licensing. we're actually running it through GitLab. So we have Dynatrace call GitLab, a GitLab pipeline via the API. And then that kicks off Ansible runners out of GitLab, so that the node licensing is actually just for that runner, out of GitLab instead of each of the endpoints. So wasn't my choice. That was, and I don't know if we're going to stick to that or not, but supposedly licenses was going to cost us millions of dollars. So we came up with this workaround. But so the GitLab pipeline has a few steps in it that kind of does these different steps.
Okay, so basically your GitLab pipeline is then kind of what we are trying to use Keptn for in terms of orchestrating your remediation process. Like,
yeah.
So, interesting. Okay.
I think for me, the main part, and I also mentioned this the last time, is that Ansible is very like general purpose. So you can do a lot of things. And if you already have all those playbooks, then there is no need to throw them away and do everything again. So for example, with Ansible, we do have the Ansible Tower integration, which you can just call runbooks from there, similar to what you might have also in GitLab. But if you want to get started, or if you want to build new integrations or new runbooks, then I think it's if you have everything in Ansible, then you might end up with writing a new playbook also in Ansible. But maybe there is another way to do this. Maybe for some action you want to execute, it's fine if it's a webhook and you just call it, or maybe the best action sometimes is just executing a bash script, or some action sometimes it's toggling a feature flag, and all these kind of smaller actions with Keptn. I guess it's quite easy to have these actions in whatever language fits best, and Keptn will execute and will call them, instead of having everything in large playbooks and doing with conditions if they get called or not. So this is one of the things where I think Keptn can bring a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I think the other, I guess, thing to consider is, so one of the things that we do is we go and with Ansible is we update the ServiceNow incident that we created, and basically are updating it the same way Keptn is updating. So we said, hey, we just, did our data gathering and we discovered the PID and here it is. And so that somebody can go look at the incident and see what the remediation process did. So, as a developer of this, okay, I know Ansible, I know how to connect to ServiceNow. In fact, I just copied somebody else's playbook that already did this function. If I'm using Keptn now, that's a different service. So now I have to learn, all right, how does, if I wanted to use the ServiceNow service from Keptn, I have to understand how does that one work? What do I need to plug in? And so you're kind of multiplying the knowledge that you need for the different services to connect to different systems, versus if you did it with one tool like an Ansible. Not saying it's bad, good, just observation for discussion is all.
A quick follow-up. I think Alois, actually, you posted a nice link to your blog post.
Yeah, I posted a link to a blog post where we describe this concept of micro operations, where I outline a number of reasons why these traditional operations workflows usually do not work. And I think that Johannes, I should make it into the demo, because one key thing usually is that you have a remediation file that you ship along with the release. This is usually a big issue because this is usually a multi-system update. So if you ship a new version of your application with your remediation instructions, and that's why the remediation instructions, you currently have encoded the entire instructions in the sequence and not in the remediation file. If you, for example, would want to change some of your procedures for the next release, that it's not, say, a JVM restart, but it is something differently. For the sake of an out of memory, it can obviously be something different. But depending on what the remediation action is, you can ship it along with the code artifacts. That's one thing. And also for microservice applications, these scripts tend to get like super complicated. That's also what I think that was a good question from Andy, like how many of those scripts do you have? If it's 2 or 3, it's fine. But if there's an individual remediation action for each service you're running, and you're running hundreds of interdependent services, writing these end-to-end remediation flows at some point gets super hard. And another point, obviously, you have those scripts, and I think the way you could also run them, by the way, in Keptn is that you simply have a service that simply also does the Ansible run as well, because you could run the Ansible script directly if you wanted to, more or less playing what GitLab is doing for you right now. But the other thing is also separation of concerns. So right now, the tool integrations and the actual process that you're running are in the same file. And we talk to a lot of companies, especially in restricted industries, where they want to separate this out. And for them, pipelines are a massive problem, because policies on how certain issues should be handled are directly intertwined with the rest of the workflows. And it often is a massive issue to audit whether those processes still work the way they were supposed to. But from the pure can you do it, I totally agree. If the only thing I really want to do is restart a JVM, then just calling an Ansible script directly is definitely the simpler solution if you wanted to do it.
And I want to add to Alice, what you were saying. I think this is the important piece, right? Ansible is what I call a do-it-yourself Swiss Army knife. You can do whatever, you can do everything, right? But the question is, if you now start out with 3 teams and they're building an Ansible script, and you already mentioned, if the next team comes on board, they probably copy and paste something from another team and then just add their little piece to it. And maybe they copy and paste includes the integration with ServiceNow, the call to ServiceNow, which means all of a sudden you have this piece of tool integration as part of 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 different Ansible scripts. And this is all in the end technical debt that you're building up. Because what if ServiceNow changes the API? What if you want to not do like a simple status update in ServiceNow, but you want to do something else, and you need to go through all of your different scripts. And the reason why this is because you have everything intertwined in one Ansible script, all the logic. And I think this is what we're trying to solve here, right? We're trying to avoid 80 to 90% of automation code that you have to write, because we are providing this integration in an event-driven way, and we provide these tool integrations, so that whoever defines your auto-remediation process can say, this is the process, and here is one step where our developers can specify what should happen to remediate a specific issue to their application. Oh yeah, they have an Ansible script that restarts it, but the rest can nicely be and independently defined by your, I don't know, SRE teams or whoever is taking care of it.
Yeah, I think it's how we were approaching it, and considering the remediation process maybe more of a global project, instead of having this packaged within each application and kind of doing your monitoring as a code and keeping it with the app. We were more or less doing it as a global type thing. So, any JVM memory problem that existed in Dynatrace would all go hit this same remediation process. Didn't matter what the app was. So it was one repository for this process, not separate by each individual app.
Okay.
And I think the other thing that I guess compounds the confusion maybe is that when we started this working group, we didn't want to isolate it to cloud native services. We said, there's companies that are still dealing with monoliths, including ours. And of course, those are the ones that our leadership want to have solved immediately. Hey, why can't we, auto-remediate these monoliths that we have so we can, use the extra help to start working towards getting to microservices and cloud native. And so by starting with those monoliths, I think we're starting with some more antiquated ideas and a different design than what this was intended for. So maybe just complicates it.
Yeah, I think the key still is that there are some key principles that you mentioned. The first thing you want to do, especially coming from a say traditional operations approach, is you want to encode more or less your remediation workflow. So you want to move away from a wiki page or a traditional human-centered runbook to an automated process. And I think everything you move in that direction obviously is great because it helps you to automate and replay this process. And as we also mentioned, that ideally can be tested automatically as well. The next thing is how many tools do you still have to touch to implement it? And I think that then gradually you can find the right balance for what you want to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally want to use Keptn. I tried to get it instituted for our POC and kind of got outweighed by others that wanted to keep it more simple. Because we want to start doing the quality gates and everything, and so if you've already got it there for that, why not continue down the path with auto-remediation? But I think the one thing that kind of stopped us with going down the Keptn track was the fact that Dynatrace was going to build it in. And so we were now between, okay, we've got it stood up, but it's open source and they're getting ready to build it directly into the Dynatrace product. So should we continue down that path? Should we wait until they release it? So we hit it kind of just at a bad time to try to push it for the enterprise. But
I have one conceptual question here. So if you run your Ansible script, so I mean, nothing against Ansible script. So my first ever demo was running an Ansible Tower instance and an Ansible script based on a Dynatrace based problem. So my question is, how do you validate whether the Ansible action actually resolved the issue? Like whether the problem in Dynatrace was closed?
Yeah, so we have at the end of the Ansible playbook, it goes through a loop and it checks, it hits the Dynatrace API and says, hey, has this problem closed or not?
Okay, it looks back for that. So you're passing the problem ID in there, and
yeah. So the very first step, the data gathering, because the only thing that comes across is the problem ID, and so then we go and we get what entity was affected, so that we can find the host to go to and the command line arguments, so that we find the right JVM in case there's multiples. So we gather all that, and then we do the kill, we validate the kill, because this is just a very simple Java app run with a Java jar command line. And then after it's running, then it will go back and check. I think it pokes it maybe every 10 seconds or 30 seconds to see if the problem has closed. And then once it's closed, it'll update ServiceNow.
And so I think this is exactly the logic that we were talking about. You can build all of this in the Ansible scripts, but now somebody has to maintain it. And this is the logic that we built into the core automation workflow engine of Keptn, right? Because Keptn will trigger your remediation, and then the next thing it does, it validates back with Dynatrace whether it solved the problem. And it's doing it in a similar way. It is looking at the problem that initially opened up the remediation workflow, if that is closed, and then additionally, you can add more SLOs, more key metrics that are important besides just the problem itself, if you want to.
Yeah, we had to develop our own workflow documentation too, you know, because after we did this, we discovered, well, okay, Ansible worked, but you know what, we can't see anything, you know, so we had to build in, you know, updating ServiceNow, and then I created a business rule in ServiceNow to go update Dynatrace to show it on the entity itself. So a lot of this Keptn stuff that's built in and showing you everything would be much easier too.
Just a quick question, Kevin, because you mentioned the task of data gathering. We were discussing that one today as well, and you used it for just identifying the service that actually had the problem, right? Is that right? Or did you also collect more information as part of this gathering process that was then presented to the user?
We have not yet. So we did the Ansible creation and POC to our CTO, I guess about a month ago. And then we went through and created that template where we said, okay, beyond the very simple case, we now need to say, okay, we need to find startup scripts and shutdown scripts and you know, do capture logs or config files, or run, you know, for IBM, run their must gather, because they're going to want it in the support ticket, or all those various things. We documented our plan, but we have not coded anything to do any of that yet.
All right, yeah, because we were thinking about actually the challenge of collecting all this data, and then what do you want to do with this data then? Because as when you already know the problem and also the root cause of what is happening, and you have the mapping between the root cause and the action, then why is there a need to collect more data in front?
Oh, sure. So that's because we're a bank and we deal with like vendors all the time. So IBM is notorious for it. And if you have never had to open a support ticket with them, they are basically going to tell you, without running these diagnostic scripts, there's not much we can do for you. You know, you can have Dynatrace and you can say, yeah, but I see in Dynatrace that here's your problem. Well, we don't rely on that. We need to look at our own data, our own logs. So they'll have you, you know, run heap dumps. They'll tell you, well, the next time it happens, and, you know, maybe it's a delay tactic, I don't know, but you often have to gather those things for the vendors, and different vendors are different. They want different things, but it's maybe less for ourselves, but more for vendors.
Okay. Then it's just collecting the data and storing it at the ticket or pushing it somewhere at on a repository. Is it then this task that you want to have here? Okay.
Yeah. So that way it's, you know, with the Dynatrace mantra that's been burned into my head, you know, you should make sure you have the information the first time it happens. You should never have to wait for it to happen again. So, you know, if you have this process in place, gather all that data so that, you know, you don't have to wait and say, you know, oh, I didn't get it this time. So be prepared, I guess.
But right now you actually made a good argument for a more modular approach, because you said depending on which application or which type of JVM needs to be restarted, this process is going to be different. So that means that you will need
Yes.
different versions for different steps in there. Obviously, the actual restart might be the same. I mean, you know whether JVM is up or not, most likely. But the data gathering might be different in this case. In some cases, even the restart scripts might be different depending on which applications you're restarting. So while your overall process flow always stays the same, like gather data, then triggering the remediation, check whether it works or escalate it, what these tasks start to do might then at some point turn out to be different, which means you need to have a library where you're more or less, depending on which process you're running, you're compiling the individual steps on the fly.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And would it then model this in Ansible or in GitLab?
I don't know yet, actually.
And
where
who
we
owns,
would do that.
Yeah. And I'm also curious who owns like the GitLab part of it, and who owns the Ansible part of it? Is it the SRE team
So
as the ops team?
yeah, in this case, it was an SRE team that did that. Again, we're kind of still in the infancy and learning as we go, and you know, discovering, hey, this might be good, this might not be good. So it's ever evolving for us. But yeah, I like the modular approach to this. You know, it was just we were keeping it simple, and now that we're expanding it, as you said, I definitely see the need to have it modularized like this for the different systems that will come into play and the different scenarios that are going to come into play.
And how? So you said you're running it globally right now, right? So every Dynatrace problem is sent to the same script. So there's no dedicated onboarding of a new service or anything needed.
So we came up with an idea of tagging the services based off of if they were ready for this type of service, but we hadn't gone down that path too far because yeah, we didn't want just any JVM restarting, because we had to have that information about it first, you know, startup, shutdown. Each one potentially could be unique. I think we need to, you know, do a canvas. Let's say, okay, WebSphere. Do we have all of our startup and shutdown scripts in a templatized location? Hopefully we do. Probably as we canvas, we'll find that there's all kinds of edge cases, and so we're going to have to, you know, if we do it globally, we would have to account for that. So I think as we go down this journey, that's also going to be a good reason for us to start pushing this back to each support team to model their systems in a fashion that can be automated. Obviously, we have to get rid of snowflakes if we ever want to automate on a large basis. So.
Yeah, I think you can have Snowflake implementations there. I think that is that's okay, but at least it needs to be a standardized API. That's pretty much the same thing that Kubernetes did to a great extent. I mean, how you implement something in your container does not necessarily matter, but there are some ground rules that you have to follow if you want to get things working properly. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. The discussions that they are really great and going on, but let me just jump back to the agenda for today. We do have a couple of minutes left, and what I want to touch today is how we continue on our scenario and our template for fixing and getting the JVM memory exhaustion problem remediated. This is, I think, what we now should discuss in the last couple of minutes to make progress here. Okay, I mean, the sample app and the setup to simulate the JVM problem. Should we go with the cards app to get this simulation done, or should we give it a try to test it out with the potato head implementation?
I think that the quick win is to do it in the cards app, because since the PR and the potato head is not yet merged, but for the long run, it just depends on when do we want to have the sample app to be ready. For the long run, I would go for the potato head, as it's a more mature app and maybe a little bit more. It has also some dependencies that we can then take into account. But if we need it really fast, then in the cards app, it's very easy, because it's already, we have the build process, we have everything, we just have to put in the loop that Kevin can provide.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think what we also do is a simple Ansible parameterized service would be a good idea for remediation. So remediation actually just runs Ansible.
Thanks. This is actually this part, the recovery of the remediation itself. Let's focus on Ansible script to execute. This is a question that we added here, but let's just move it down for a minute. Kevin, is there a chance that we can reuse the Ansible script that you implemented? You and your team.
There's a chance. Yeah, I can ask. I can see what we can do generically that won't get us in hot water.
Actually, let's go back to the first item. Is someone up for implementing this change into the card service? I mean, the JVM problem.
So basically, it's just for every call adding some block or allocating some amount of memory and storing it somewhere where it in a static variable, more or less.
True, and Kevin also provided an example where just a loop gets executed that fills up the memory and then runs into an issue. But let me I will take care of getting that one implemented and done. The process orchestration via Keptn we discussed today, and yeah, I already showed you how it could look like, and I would propose to go this route to use Keptn for doing our remediation scenario. And the data gathering part, this is now the first action that is maybe not that obvious or not clear what should be done there. Can we use the next 2 weeks to figure out what we have to do there and how this should look like?
Yeah, maybe I can also comment on this, because Johannes, we were talking about this also today, and so I would be really interested in maybe in Kevin's example, what are you currently collecting, and where are you storing this? Is it only for archiving purposes? Is it also for analysis purposes and finding the right action? Thinking about it, kind of this is a modular approach, and we can also kind of the data gathering can be done in different parts, and after data gathering there can be maybe an analysis part to find out what might be the right action. But interesting would be which data is needed to be collected, and where is the data currently stored? Is it from? Is it already in some kind of I don't know, Prometheus or Dynatrace, or is there any other data hub where that holds some the logs, or do you have to go directly to the box and fetch some more data there? So where is this right now located? Where is the data? And which data sources have to be pulled actually?
Yeah, in our case, we were kind of just walking through what a support person would do. You know, they get called and they are told, hey, this JVM's out of memory. You know, one of the typical things that they'll do, you know, for the vendor is to, you know, capture a heap dump so that they can review the heap dump. You know, let's say Dynatrace wasn't the tool of choice that discovered this, you know, which would have the memory dump for you, or hey, the ActiveGate wasn't configured for the memory dump analysis. Somebody messed up and the data's not there. Again, want to make sure that there's no oopsies. So go ahead and kick off that JVM memory dump and capture it so that it can be analyzed later. You know, some vendors obviously have scripts that they like to run that go and collect, you know, different pieces of data, OS data, JVM data, you know, it runs the gamut. So again, I think it's a plug and play of options, depending on your app.
But Kevin, is this data then part of the remediation process in the sense that is handed over to the next step in the process, or is it just stored somewhere for someone to look at?
I would say yes, that it's stored somewhere for someone to deal with. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I would also add the example where one JVM can actually not be restarted.
Alice, what do you mean with one JVM cannot be restarted?
To that point, that is not applicable necessarily for all JVMs, because I think right now the example looks. I think right now we're in a bit of a hello world situation here, because if the only thing we really want to do is execute a generically like one action, it's always the same. But we are ignoring that the developer might specify that for their service they can restore it or cannot restore it, and we could show the different behavior where we say, well, this service can be restarted or this service cannot be restarted, and then have the process behave differently and give the developer control what is allowed on their service.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not exactly this example, but I think the example is to some extent so straightforward that you don't need any powerful solution necessarily to run it for that. But also, Kevin obviously brought up the case that it's not allowed for all of their JVMs right now. That was also what he brought up around tagging. So you should also have the possibility that for a certain service, either a certain service or a certain service version, you're not allowed to restart it because it maybe doesn't allow to do it.
Yeah, I wonder if that ties into step 2 of the change process there. You know, if you have this documented in your CMDB that says, you know, this can be restarted, but maybe only during the maintenance window. And so you can't do it right now, or yes, it can be restarted, but you need to get, an approval first. And whether that be, hey, I can do a Slack bot approval or some other, process there. But I don't know, maybe that ties into that change process of allowing or not allowing.
That's actually another good point. Should the change process or the approval process be really tied into the remediation process itself, or is it somewhere extracted in another solution or service that does this job then for you? I mean, you mentioned last time that you are using ServiceNow for checking the approvals and making sure that the person who is allowed to do the action gets asked.
Mm-hmm.
This is still the case, right? That you're using ServiceNow for that?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, till the next meeting. I mean, I will take care of the cards app, and Kevin, you're about the Ansible script. And what else should we tackle on to get the scenario running for us?
What was that question?
What else should we work on to get the remediation, the scenario or the template working for us? I mean, should we also already work on the change process?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of define what are now the parts of the whole process that have to be in the process for kind of exceeding this hello world example. I think we kind of agree that there has to be the validation part, because that's one of the parts that we identified early on, that the validation has to be part. Data gathering, I think, is also an important part that we already identified that has to be there. The approval process, in my perspective, it makes a lot of sense to think about how are approvals currently done, and I believe they are not right now. They are not done inside Keptn, so they are done somewhere else. So it has to be kind of how can this, how can the processes and how can the tools then interconnected, and how can we still use like Keptn as the orchestrator, and which tools are currently doing the process. And I think we also have to take a look here on tools like PagerDuty or other tools that are like incident response tools, and how they are currently doing this, and what is their strengths, and what is the process, what they are lacking, and what can we bring to the table.
Good point. Should we do an outreach how data gathering and the change process is currently implemented in other tools, to not rebuild what others already do?
I think what I'm kind of seeing here, I think what would be useful to still model the entire process end to end, just to draw it. Because just in the last hour, we talked at least about 5 or 6 different tools to run a single process, and it would be good to lay out like all the tool interdependencies which we have here right now, and who's controlling which parts of those steps. We had like so far, like we had obviously Dynatrace as a early monitoring tool in this case. We had GitLab for execution and modeling. We had Ansible in there. We had some third-party tooling for data gathering in there. We had ServiceNow workflows in there. We had the CMDB in there with additional information on services, which technically is also ServiceNow, but CMDB could be somewhere else.
That's a very good point. I mean, we already have identified those tools in our working document on the template. Here we have added a couple of notes, but it would make perfect sense to now bring the picture together and to make it clear to everyone how the tools are connected and how everything is then working together.
And also a control flow, like who is in control of which parts of the process? Is there a central control entity, or is it passed on between different tools? I think it is a good example because it's more complex than just changing something in the system. I'm always a bit that for the change process, I think we should integrate it. I'm always just thinking it's if the change process is modeled that way, which obviously makes sense because somebody has to check certain things. It would even be interesting on a service level if it can be done automatically or not automatically if I know this ahead of time. I'm just thinking that right now the restart procedure, the remediation procedure is differently whether it's happening at 2 a.m. in the morning or at 10 a.m. depending how fast people can reply. Obviously you have a 24/7 knock, so somebody will eventually look at it.
All right, then I would summarize the action items as follows. As I said, I will take care of the app and Kevin about the Ansible script, but I would, or all of us, we should continue modeling the process and the tool integrations. And therefore, let's continue on our working document where the proof of concept is kind of already laid out, but let's just add here the tools that are all involved and the responsibilities that they have within this process. Does this make sense to all of you?
Mm-hmm.
All right, yep, then thanks a lot for joining, and yeah, let's jointly work on the model to get a clear picture and to see how everything ties together. Then thanks for the meeting this week. See you then in 2 weeks.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Good discussion.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.